Hello everyone. Today, I want to read you a fan fiction I wrote about my hero Akademia. The story is about a girl named Kain, and the entire story is told from her perspective. Everything happens through her point of view. This is the first part of my fan fiction. The orphanage where I lived, contrary to what many people might think, was a warm and friendly place. The children always played together, and the caretakers looked after us with kindness. The walls of the rooms were filled with colourful paintings, and sometimes the heroic stories we read in the newspapers would turn into our games. All the kids loved to play the role of heroes, especially when famous heroes from the city, like All Might, appeared on TV. But for me, that happiness meant nothing. From the moment I realized that my parents had been heroes and had abandoned me, I could no longer accept heroes. Every time the kids talked about heroes or played hero games, anger would boil inside me. I didn't see the heroes they talked about. I only saw my parents who had left me. The kids would excitedly talk about heroes and imagine themselves as one of them. But I couldn't bear it. Many times when the kids were playing, I'd rush into their game and start a fight. For them, heroes were symbols of hope and strength. But for me, they were only signs of betrayal and abandonment. When I could no longer tolerate that environment, I decided to run away. That night, everyone was asleep. The orphanage, with all its kindness and peace, was no longer a place where I could stay. I quietly got out of bed and stepped into the empty hallways. The faint sound of my footsteps echoed in the dark corridors, and my heart pounded in my chest. No one noticed, and there was no sound except for my breathing. When I finally stepped outside and reached the street, a cold breeze hit my face, and for the first time, I felt free. The streets were cold and dark. At that young age, everything terrified me. I slept by alleys at night and wandered during the day, looking for something to eat. Hunger and cold were my constant companions, to the point where I couldn't even think clearly. With each passing day, I grew weaker. One day, out of desperation, I walked into a small shop. The shopkeeper was busy talking to customers and wasn't paying attention to me. I stole some bread and fruit and ran out of the store as fast as I could. My heart was racing and my breaths were short, but at least I had something to eat. One cold, dark night on the streets, I prayed from the depths of my heart, wishing for someone like me, someone who could understand me. While I was praying, a young boy approached and tried to help me off the ground. But the moment I grabbed his hand and stood up, I felt an overwhelming weakness. The next day, when I regained consciousness, I found myself in a house that felt warm and friendly. I realized it was the house of the boy I had met the previous day. After a few days, I left. For one reason. The kind boy's father was a hero. I didn't want to be near heroes. Later, I found out that the boy had changed after that day. He had become deeply bitter towards life, and what was even stranger, he seemed a bit older. This experience made me realize that I had a kose, a power that could change people's personalities. Everything was becoming clearer to me. After I figured out what my kose was, an idea crossed my mind: to turn All Might, the hero of heroes, into a villain. I wanted to drag All Might into the world of villains. I fell in love with this idea, and the thought of the hero's downfall thrilled me. It was a sweet and exciting dream, but I didn't want it to remain just a dream. So I started searching for All Might. And after weeks, I finally saw him. I was so excited that my dream was about to come true that I ran towards All Might with a smile. But suddenly, a criminal appeared from across the street, and All Might rushed to apprehend him at full speed. I was crushed, and my beautiful smile turned into a frown. For days and weeks after that incident, I was deeply saddened. A few days later, while I was sitting weakly in one of the alleys, I heard someone's voice. When I looked up, I saw a boy a bit older than me. He had blue hair and a scar on his face. His voice was full of mockery. "You hate heroes? Or are you crying for yourself?" I glared at him and said, "Both." It was the only thing I could manage to say. During those days, anger and hatred consumed my entire being. I glanced at him and noticed how surprised he looked. It seemed like he had said it as a joke. It's true, I am a scary kid, a monster hiding in the skin of a human, trying to live among them. I wondered, are they still looking for me in the orphanage? Or have they forgotten about me? I was lost in my thoughts when the boy's laughter brought me back to reality. After his childlike, yet sinister laugh, he looked at me with excitement and said, "Really? Then just wait here for a bit, okay?" After saying that, he ran off, and once again, I was alone. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there and put my head down. When I woke up, I saw that the boy had returned with someone else, a man whose face was terrifying. The man gave me a cold smile and said, "You've got a kosei, don't you?" With a trembling voice, I said, "Yeah." I still didn't understand why these people wanted to help me, but I felt like I should trust them. The boy reached out his hand and said, "Come with me. You want to kill All Might and anyone else you hate? We'll help you." With their help, I learned how to use my kosei's power. They taught me how to keep it hidden until I was ready. Now I knew what my path was, the destruction of heroes and ultimately revenge against All Might. My failed attempts to turn All Might into a villain only fueled my anger and hatred even more.